Okay, good evening, everyone. Hi. Woo! Thank you. My name is Olivia. I work here at Or Books, which is housed in the back of this bar, the Francis Kite Club. Thank you all for coming out tonight. This is part of a series of events we put on many times a month. It's called Live on Avenue C. And we started it a few years ago to give all of you an opportunity to gather in this beautiful bar that was created to be a gathering space for leftists, for people that want to organize, to have conversations about our books and about other things as well. Or is a small, independent, radical publishing house. We are the proud publishers of people like Norman Finkelstein, like Eileen Miles, Slavoj Žižek, a whole host of other important thinkers and writers. We aim to publish books that push up against the mainstream narrative and that offer some type of intervention into what you might otherwise be hearing and seeing in regular news. We are also the proud publishers of Jeremy Corbyn. So the book that you see tonight and that's for sale, Poetry for the Many, it's not a new book. We published it about 2 years ago. It's a collection of Jeremy and Len McCluskey's favorite poetry and commentary on it. And Jeremy is in town in New York, and we were excited and are huge fans, as are, I think, all of you. And so we invited him to come join us tonight, and he'll be in conversation with Colin Robinson, the publisher of Or Books. And they'll kind of be talking about whatever they want to talk about. So we'll welcome them up onto the stage now. Thanks for coming. One more thing. Besides books being for sale, we are having a short Q&A, so think of some questions. They'll open it up to you. Just stand up and enunciate when that time comes. All right, thanks. Okay, this is happening. He's just running to the bathroom and received some news. So when you're a very important person, you have to respond to very important things quickly. But I promise they will be out here in just 1 second.
I must confess that there are things I can't accept. I think of you when I am still.
Hi, everyone. Um, oh,
Happy birthday. Come on, let's have a song. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Colin. Happy birthday to you.
well, it's never been felt so great to be 45, I can tell you. I mean, what better way to celebrate one's birthday than to have one of the truly, truly great political figures of in Britain here in our bar. I'm so honoured to have Jeremy Corbyn here with us tonight. Someone I've just found throughout my political life to be a complete inspiration for his principle and his steadfastness, his generosity to people. It's just a dream come true for me. So really, really, really pleased to have you here, Jeremy. I thought we would just have a brief chat about some politics and maybe finish off with talking about some poetry, because we published a book with Jeremy, this book, Poetry for the Many, which he put together with Len McCluskey, who we also publish, a great trade union leader, and a beautiful book. And there are copies of it on sale at the front. So I'm sure Jeremy would be happy to sign them if you want to get him to do that at the end of the discussion. But let me start off, Jeremy, by
That's spilt the beans, hasn't it?
So yeah, Jeremy, welcome to New York. And I'm just wondering, I mean, what are you up to here, and what are you making of the city?
I'm here. Well, first of all, thank you all for inviting me, and Colin, very, very happy birthday to you. And thank you not just for tonight, but also for your work on the poetry book, which we'll come back to a bit later on when we start discussing poetry. I'm here with my colleague Bel Ribeiro Addy from the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament Group in Parliament, and we're at the United Nations this week for the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference, and we've been speaking at a number of seminars and events there on the inadequacy of it and the way that the world is heading in a very bad direction, with all of the nuclear weapon states building new, even more destructive weapons. And we're here to support the Nuclear Ban Treaty, which is to campaign for the abolition of nuclear weapons altogether. But also, to me, it's to campaign against militarism and the growth of war and the arms trade. So there's a lot of issues surrounding that. And it's been fascinating doing, and I haven't been in New York for quite a long time, and I'm really enjoying it, and enjoying it that you've got a very good mayor for the first time for a very long time. I'm very pleased that my son Seb came here to help campaign for his election, and we just had a lovely discussion this afternoon with people that put so much effort into that campaign, and how that campaign grows into a movement for social change, a movement for socialism, a movement for social justice. So to me, these are great days to be in New York, because they're days of hope, they're days of optimism, and above all, they're days of achievement. So we can demonstrate to the rest of the world that even in a big capitalist city like New York, you can win support for rational, sensible, intelligent socialist views, which deals with poverty, deals with housing, but above all, gives that precious commodity of hope to young people and the next generation. So it's great to be here. Thank you.
So I saw Zoran being interviewed the other day, and people talking to him said, do you feel any particular pressures at the moment? I mean, is anything making you anxious? And he said, well, there is one thing. That is the way that Arsenal are playing in the Premiership at the moment, and I'm very worried about the big game on Sunday, which did not turn out well for Arsenal. And I know you two are.
Why are you bringing all this up, Colin? Is that because you're not an Arsenal fan? Well, I know you're not an Arsenal fan.
No.
Well, when I knew Zoran was running for election, I was obviously very worried about him. And so to help him on his way, I sent over an Arsenal shirt with his name on. And he won the election. It's obvious, isn't it? The connection is clear as anything. And now we've got a big game tomorrow night against Atletico Madrid. We're going to win that. And then we've got to win the last 4 games in the Premiership. And we're champions. Isn't it obvious to you?
Painful to even consider. So I just wondered the thing that's going on with Zoran at the moment is, I suppose he's dealing with the abilities of being in power. And you have to make compromises in a authority.
Like,
can you hear me now? Yeah. You have to make compromises when you're in a position of authority like he is. And I wonder, I just wanted to ask, you had a period where you were very close to the centres of power in British politics when you were leader of the Labour Party. And that must have been a period when you couldn't simply say what you would say as an activist or a campaigner. Did you feel the kind of pressure to have to moderate your views when you were in that situation? How did you deal with that?
I felt enormous pressures were being put on me by a lot of people, some of whom were great friends, comrades and supporters who were trying to do the best for our cause, campaign and movement. But I also got an awful lot of pressure from people who frankly did not wish us well at all. And I'll give you an example. During the 2017, when Theresa May rather surprisingly called an election, that day was obviously traumatic, because anyone who said they predicted it is talking nonsense. It was a complete surprise. And my office said to me, what are you going to do now? And I said, first of all, we're all going to get together in this big room. And I said, as of now, we go out and campaign. As of now, we're outside. As of now, we're working for the people. Look out of the windows. There's the people there we're working for. And they said, what's your next plan today? I said, to fulfill my engagement, to speak to a meeting of carers in Birmingham, which I went to do. Came back to London and then had a meeting with Labour MPs, the vast majority of whom were extremely hostile to me. A number of them came up to me after the meeting, indeed followed me to my office and said, this is the last chance you've got to resign and go away. So I invited them to do the opposite and go away themselves, and said, no resignation, that we're going out there to campaign for social justice. And we won. I was elected leader by the people, a majority of members and union supporters, not by any of you. And the microphone, it doesn't agree with me, so it's gone off. And so we went out and campaigned, and we got from 24% in the polls up to 41% during that campaign. We more than almost doubled our support during that campaign. And we did it by public meetings and rallies and a radical manifesto, which I was very proud of. Was I invited to compromise? Yeah. There's lots of cases people said, well, don't say this, don't say that. And I said, well, no, actually, we need to say to people that we're going to try and have a government that redistributes wealth and power, and a foreign policy based on peace and justice. There were problems because Labour Party policy was not exactly as I wanted it to be, particularly in the international sphere. But if you can take people with you, at least in the direction you want to go, then things can happen. And so I was then asked by the senior civil servants who didn't think we were going to win until a week before when they were convinced we were. And then these are very senior, came and demanded meetings with me, which I agreed to meet them when I could fit it in, but it was quite difficult because I was doing a lot of travelling. We did over 100 rallies in this campaign. And so they said, okay, when you become Prime Minister, what's the first thing you want to do? What's the first manifesto pledge you're going to talk about? I said, I want to go out there and say, as of now, as of this moment, homelessness is over in this country. The government will pay for housing for everybody. There will be no more rough sleeping ever again in our society. It's disfigurement against civilization in any form. And they gulped a bit and said, okay, we'll prepare the papers on it. And so that was going to be how we were going to start. The idea was, like Zoran, you go out there and you say what you're trying to achieve. And it's not the only ill in society, it's not the only social evil, it's not the only inequality. But to me, it would be an important statement of what we want to do and how we're going to go about achieving it. And so, yeah, there were pressures, of course there were. But we then fought through all of that. And then we had, after 2017, the media attacks intensified. And the next year and a half were brutal in the media attacks on us, which were designed to take us down altogether. Yeah, we did not succeed in winning the next election, but all I would say is that we received more votes in both the election campaigns when I led the party than were achieved this century by any other leader of the party, including Keir Starmer, who became Prime Minister. So I'm proud of what we achieved in policy changes, proud of the results that we got, devastated we didn't quite get into government to carry them out. But we were under the cosh from the media and under the cosh from the right wing of the Labour Party, who never wanted us to lead it, never wanted us to win an election, and were prepared to sacrifice everything to defeat the radical proposals we were putting forward about redistribution of wealth and power in our society. That's the cause of all of us as socialists. Redistribute wealth and power and empower the people to do better.
You did build a magnificent movement around that campaign in 2017. I remember my dad telling me about. My dad lives in a little town called West Kirby, which is just outside Liverpool, and it's actually a pretty sort of middle class place. Not, I wouldn't say a hotbed of socialist politics at all. But when you arrived that day in West Kirby, and I think talked on the beach, my dad said 2,000 people turned up to hear you speak on the beach. And he said he'd never seen anything like it. And he was not, my dad, he's a socialist, but kind of pessimist at the same time. And he said, suddenly I've got hope again. And I think that day you went from the beach in West Kirby to Tranmere Rovers Football Club. And the Libertines were playing there that day, and your people had asked if you could come out and address the crowd before the Libertines came on. And Jeremy went out in front of the crowd, and I think from what I've read you say, you weren't sure that you were being that well received to begin with, but you soon realised that actually the entire crowd in the stadium, a very working class crowd in Birkenhead, which is a poor area near Liverpool, a poor town near Liverpool, was singing, "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn, oh, Jeremy Corbyn," which became a kind of national anthem for quite a while. It was really, really an exciting, spectacular time. And it made me realise that there were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who were committed to the kind of politics that you were representing there. It was really, really something special.
That day was extraordinary because I was traveling all over the country all the time, and we drove up to West Kirby for that rally, my main concern was that the organisers had got the timing wrong, and the tide would come in like some sort of biblical disaster. These thousands of people out in front of me on the beach, and a sort of tidal wave would come in behind, and they'd all be drowned or something. And so I kept saying, "Are you sure you've got this right?" And they said, "The tide's still going out." And I said, "No, it's not. Look out there. It obviously is coming in." They said, "No, it's not coming in yet." I said, "I hope you've got this right, mate." And so we then had the rally on the beach, which was extraordinary. And then there'd been a debate about whether I should go to the Wirral Live Music Festival in Prenton Park. And I was very happy to go and very happy to support the music festival, because that, we'll come on to that when we discuss poetry, my ideas about music opportunities and education. But I said, "Are you sure the crowd really want somebody turning up unannounced to make a speech between acts?" And it was between Reverend and the Makers and the Libertines. So I go on the stage and start my speech, which is about music and culture and opportunities and working class culture in Merseyside, and the musical brilliance of the whole area, whole region for that matter. I start talking about this, and people looking at me, and there's some clapping going on, but then they start this noise coming, and I'm on the stage and I can't actually hear what's being said. So I thought, "Oh my God, they're all chanting off or something, And then I look at them and they're all smiling. And so at that point I stop, and then it's the sort of wonderful warmth of the crowd, who absolutely got the political message that music is a form of political resistance. Music is the political voice of the oppressed all around the world. Music is the political voice of people who've got ideas they want to express in different ways. And it was just a absolutely magnificent occasion, and I'm forever grateful to both Reverend the Makers and the Libertines for allowing me on between their acts. And then I went to Reverend the Makers came and did a concert in my area, and so I called them up. He said, "Oh yeah, come and be our guest." And so I went to their concert. Fantastic! What a lovely group! What a lovely bunch of people! And the way that they are not afraid to make political statements as musicians, whereas so many well-known musicians are usually heavily under the cosh from management companies and daren't say anything at all about anything remotely controversial. It's not something that affects Reverend the Makers. So well done them.
So I think when the establishment realized in 2017 that actually the politics that you were articulating were genuinely popular and really posed a threat to that establishment, they really turned the screws on you. And there was this vicious campaign outside and inside the Labour Party accusing you of anti-Semitism and basically maneuvering in order to marginalize you in the party, which eventually led to the rise after the next general election in 2019 of Keir Starmer as leader of the party. And what's now happening, what seems very clear, chronicled in a couple of books that we've published, was that the maneuvering inside the party was ruthless and undemocratic, and it meant that you were replaced by someone who, although they claimed to be a friend and sympathetic to your politics, turned out to be really a completely establishment shill in the shape of Keir Starmer. And I'm wondering now, do you think that Starmer's leadership and the people around him spell the end of the Labour Party as a significant political force in British politics?
Well, Labour is facing a huge electoral test in the local elections next week in England, as well as national elections in Scotland and Wales. and every indication is that Labour is going to do extremely badly. And it is partly about Starmer, but more than anything, it is about the direction of travel of the government by continuing austerity politics, dragging us deeper and deeper into conflicts around the world. And whilst he claims not to be involved in the war waged by the US and Israel against Iran, in reality, Britain is deeply involved because it's providing the military bases that the bombardment takes place from. So they're deeply involved in it. What's the future of the Labour Party? Well, Starmer stood for leader of the Labour Party on the basis of continuation of all the policies we'd fought the 2019 election on. And I was interviewed 2 weeks ago by a former Conservative MP, Giles Brandreth, who it was quite an interesting interview, actually, because he said, I'd forgotten it was him who did it, but he said he went round a typical Conservative town in the south of England and had on a piece of card the policies fundamental to our election, which was public ownership of water, electricity, railways and mail, for example. Had there a national care service to deal with the problems of the over-expensive care that people have. Had on it the things like ending student tuition fees and a number of issues like that. And so he he went up to people and said, what do you think about these policies, for or against? So he would say, what do you think about public ownership of water, for example? What do you think about student tuition fees? What do you think about increased corporation tax on the biggest corporation? And he said every single one of them came out with a positive, either 50, 55, 60, or in the case of some of them, 70%. He said, okay, what if I tell you that the person promoting these policies is this person? Turn the card round with my picture on it. They said, oh God, him. and so that was the result of unremitting personal abuse of me. I never wanted the whole thing to be about me. It's not me, it's not my style. I'm more into communities, people and movements than all of that. And he said he was just, and he's not a socialist, doesn't pretend to be. He said he was just shocked at the effect of the media attacks on what we're doing and the foul, disgusting accusation that was thrown at me all the time that somehow or other, because I supported the cause of the Palestinian people, it made me an anti-Semite. I am an anti-racist to the core of my bones. Every form of racism has to be opposed, and there is no exceptionalism in that. It's all forms of racism we have to oppose. And I see that Zoran has been going through exactly the same thing. Support Zoran and support all the anti-racists fighting together, and special shout out and thanks to very brave, well-demanding people in the radical Jewish community, Jewish Voices for Labour, Jewish Socialist Group, and so many others, and those Jewish anti-Zionists that have spoken up in solidarity with everybody else, because they remember what the Jewish people went through when the Nazis took over. They remember the hardship of the people in the Bund and the way they were treated, and it's that tradition we want to inherit. And I'll just finish on this. When the Nazis came after the Jewish and Irish and black communities in east of London in the 1930s, there was a famous demonstration known as the Battle of Cable Street, when the fascists were prevented from marching through London. One of the people that was there preventing them marching through London was my mother. That's the tradition we come from.
So you're outside the Labour Party, and you managed to achieve a spectacular victory as an independent in Islington North against the Labour Party candidate, with a lot of resources behind them. And then with Zara Sultana, you set up a new political party, your party. and there was some, I think, ructions at the beginning of the creation of that party, but they seem to have settled down again now. And you, I think, are working in alliance with the Green Party to try and create a left alternative outside of Labour. What do you think of the prospects of success of that project?
We're working with a number of people around the country, independent groups that are fighting in particular councils. There's been a growth of independent groups, thinking of Kirklees in Yorkshire, I'm thinking of Blackburn, of Bolton, of Sefton, which is Southport, just outside Liverpool. There's no elections in Liverpool this year. And a number of London boroughs. By and large, all these independent groups are on the same kind of agenda about building social housing, council housing, known as in the UK, and issues such as trying to support students through local authority bursaries. That's being done in Tower Hamlets by a group called Aspire, which control the council at the moment, with the Lutfar Rahman as the mayor. A number of places. So we're doing that campaigning jointly with your party, and where there are individuals who are members of your party, we're endorsing them so they can use the symbol on the ballot paper. This is the first electoral outing of us. The relationship with the Greens is good in the sense that we're trying to make arrangements so we don't end up in some fight to the death between us and the Greens in any election. We give space to each other. The Greens are not necessarily a socialist party or a socialist organisation. There are political differences, but there are a lot of socialists in the Greens, as well as people of a much more conservative view of the world. And so I think the next few months after these elections are going to see quite an interesting shakedown on left politics. And there are a lot of people who were in the Labour Party are now either in nothing or have joined in with us, or in many cases joined the Greens as well. And so we're working with them. I work also with the Peace and Justice Project, which we set up straight after I'd ceased to be leader of the Labour Party, which is the thought process behind this book, for example, the poetry book, where we're providing what I call a space and a home for the politically homeless. And so we do quite a lot of campaigning and discussion groups and so on. And we're producing we organised the Gaza Tribunal, which was a public tribunal to examine the case against the British government for complicity in genocide in Gaza. And we had 29 expert witnesses giving evidence to it. And we're now publishing all that in a book which is coming out in the very near future, as well as the publicity surrounding the tribunal. That isn't of itself going to change everything, but it helps to build up the atmosphere of the connivance of the British government with the unspeakable crimes that have been committed against the Palestinian people in Gaza, where genocide has been committed. 74,000 people have been killed by bombardment weapons, some of which came from Britain, mostly from the USA. But are we all going to be spectators in this ghastly crime, or are we going to do something about it? I know I'm speaking to the converted here, but interestingly, popular opinion around the world is rising up in support of the Palestinian people and a humanitarian future for everybody that lives within Palestine.
Well, I know that you've been played an incredible role in building the Solidarity with Palestine movement in the UK. And I'm wondering, do you think that movement can be turned into opposing this war in Iran as it's occurring? Because there's something really quite weird happening here, I would say, at least it seems weird to me, which is that this is the least popular war that the United States has entered into in my lifetime. And you can tell that if the New York Times is not supporting it, it must be pretty fucking unpopular. And yet there actually doesn't seem to be very much of a movement on the streets. Nothing like what we saw back in 2003 around the Iraq War. And I wonder if you had any thoughts about why that might be happening.
Yeah, I think you're right that, first of all, it is a deeply unpopular war and incredibly dangerous what's going on. And the role of Trump in this and promoting this war, I think even he realizes that he's grossly underestimated Iran's ability to defend itself, grossly underestimated the opposition to this war around the world, and the fact that it's not only not supported by the New York Times, most European governments have either distanced themselves from Trump and his plans, or in the case of Spain and Italy, actively said they will not allow the use of any military facilities, despite their being members of NATO, in the bombardment of Iran. And they are then, one level, threatened by Trump, but at another level, even he must understand that he's kind of on his own on this one. And he appears not to understand international law either, in that since neither the US nor Iran have signed up to any international maritime law in respect to the Strait of Hormuz, what Iran is doing is perfectly rational. They control the Strait of Hormuz and are exercising that control. And I hope the ceasefire lasts, and I hope that the role of Pakistan in at least hosting the possibility of a ceasefire is a good thing, and maybe on the fringes of the NPT conference where Iran is present, because it's a signatory, it was an active signatory, will be one of the factors in it. But this war is abominable and appalling. I don't know how many people have been killed, but Israel, whilst fighting claims a separate war, is actually part and parcel of the US operation. But Israel is also using the war as an opportunity to take over all of Lebanon south of the Litani River, and also to expand into Syria beyond the Golan Heights. So we're into some dangerous, very, very dangerous stuff here. But it is surprising there isn't more popular opposition to it. But maybe, since most of the media are not very supportive of the war either, people feel, well, it's okay, it's going to end pretty quickly because Trump has gone too far on this one. I don't really share that view. I think we have to be out there much more publicly opposing it. Now, in answer to the first point you made, it's a good one. I've spoken at every single one of the Palestine events we've had in London. We've had 36 big public rallies. And at the end of all of them, I've said, thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you for your support, concern, solidarity with the people of Palestine. But we need to turn this into a global movement of a different form of international relations, a different form of policy. Because at the moment, we've got a war in Iran, we've got a war in Lebanon, you've obviously got the continued bombardment of Gaza and of the West Bank. You have a hot war going on in Sudan, funded by weapons coming in through the United Arab Emirates. You have a continued war going on in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is all about getting control of mineral resources. And you have a continued war going on in the Yemen. Who benefits from all this? The only people that benefit are the arms industry. Last year, global arms sales topped almost $3 trillion and are going to go up $3 trillion, a third of which was spent by the USA, and continuing to rise. And whilst it's difficult for the media to ever concentrate on more than one thing at a time, there's also, with the war going on in Ukraine, which is more like a reminiscent of the First World War. I don't know what the death toll is, but I do know, again, arms manufacturers across Europe and the USA are doing very well out of providing equipment to Ukraine. Arms manufacturers in Russia and other places are also doing well out of this. We need a global movement for peace. What are the issues facing this world? Environmental disaster, global human inequality, and the growth of the arms trade and weaponry and war, a row back from an environmentally sustainable agenda, which was all the rage only 5 years ago, and a beastly attitude of media all over the West towards refugees and asylum seekers. Why are they refugees? Why are they asylum seekers? Escaping from war, poverty, environmental destruction, and the economic policies imposed on what are some of the poorest countries in the world by the IMF and International Monetary Fund and World Bank and so on. We need to have a better approach to the world. And so I like to think that all those that have come out and protest about Palestine are also educating themselves about issues facing this world. Are we to bequeath to our children a generation of more wars, more destruction? And since half of the extinctions of the natural world have taken place during my lifetime, what natural world is going to be left for the next 2 or 3 generations at the rate we're going on? We have to be serious about environmental sustainability. It's not an either-or or an add-on. You can retain services, living standards, and life. You don't have to destroy the planet in the process, but you do have to be prepared to boldly defend the environmental sustainability that we all need in order to survive.
Jeremy, I wanted to just finish up by talking very briefly about this book, Poetry for the Many, that you did with Len McCluskey. This book came about because of a meeting that took place in Liverpool, which is the city I come from, or at least near Liverpool, and there was a poetry evening at the Dockers Club in Liverpool called the Casa, and Len and Jeremy were reading poems there, and it was an amazing evening. It was in the middle of COVID. It was absolutely packed. I mean, steam was rising off the crowd. Very few. It was a young crowd as well. Very few of them wearing masks. I thought we would be lucky to get out of there alive, frankly. But it was such a wonderful, moving evening. Len and Jeremy read out poems that they cared about and explained why they liked them, and then they invited people to read poems that they liked themselves, or perhaps that they'd written themselves. And people stood up and read from their phones these poems. And it was just exceptional. I mean, it was really a great night. And Kerry Murphy, who is Len's partner and worked with Jeremy when he was leader of the opposition, said maybe we could make a book out of this. And so a year and a half later, we had copies of Poetry for the Many, and it's a beautiful book. I really would encourage you to get a copy and to read it. Jeremy says in his introduction to the book that he thinks that everyone has a poem inside them, and I know poetry's been very important for you, Jeremy, and maybe you'd like to say just a few words about that. And then I thought maybe you might like to read one of the poems that you picked for the book. I was thinking maybe the Mahmoud Darwish book, but you could pick any one you want. I think it would be a nice way to end this.
Thanks, Colin. I've loved poetry all my life, and I write a bit of poetry. I don't publish it, except for the one that's in this book, the poem there about refugees in Calais. Len McCluskey also loves poetry, and I didn't know that. We're in my office one day, and I'm leader of the party, and Len is General Secretary and leader of the biggest union, biggest affiliate of the party. So we had quite a long discussion about economic policy, and that went fine. That was, we got to where we got to on that and what we were going to do. That was all right. And then he sits back in his chair and he looks around. He said, why have you got poetry books on your bookshelf in the office? So I said, well, have you got a problem about that then? He said, no, I haven't got that one. What do you mean I haven't got that one? So he points to one. I said, why, do you want to borrow it? And so then I didn't know this about Len. He actually loves poetry, particularly Christina Rossetti and many others. And so we kind of kept in touch on this and chatted about it various times. Anyway, after we'd set up the Peace and Justice Project, we're then talking about poetry and how we promote it. And he said, look, I'll tell you what. And Melissa Benn was very much in favour of this, is Tony Benn's daughter. And she agreed to sort of chair a meeting where Len and I would read poetry to an audience in Liverpool. So we go to Liverpool and we're going towards the Casa for the event. And I said, Len, I hope we've got this right. He said, what do you mean? I said, there might not be anybody there. You know, do people really want to come along and hear you and I chatting about poetry? He said, I don't know. We'll find out when we get there. So we got there, absolutely ram-packed. And we each go to the front and we've got a stack of poetry books and we choose various poems that we're going to read and discuss them and take questions and discuss them. The idea being to promote the idea that there's an imagination in all of us. And this came from the policy I'd been promoting, which was called a pupil arts premium, where there'd be a central government allocation to every school in the country to ensure that every child had an opportunity to learn to play a musical instrument, to get some acting lessons, to get art lessons, and get the opportunity to read and understand and write poetry. The pupil arts premium, totally ring-fenced. It can't be spent on anything else. Because I believe that I'm fed up with the idea that the elite private schools do all of that. The state schools cut back on it all because they can't afford to keep it going. So I wanted to make sure it was there for everybody. And so during the event, there was a group of young people, sort of roughly where you guys are there. This kid's going like this. So I said, you okay? Jezza, I've got a poem. Can I read it? Yeah, sure. So he pulls out his mobile phone and reads a poem from it. It was good, wasn't it, that poem? And then various mates of his got up. And so it became not a chat with me and Len. It became a chat with these kids and everybody else. And it went on for ages, this thing, even though it was totally packed and pretty uncomfortable in there. And then Colin comes up at the end. Obviously, I'd known Colin before, and so had Len. And Colin said, that's really nice. Why don't you guys put it in a book? And I said, oh, I don't know about that. What do you reckon, Len? Len said, oh, I don't know about that. And so Colin said, come on, you can do it. So you were very persuasive.
Not financially.
And so we then agreed we would do it. And then we put it together. And the idea behind it is that we would each choose a number of poems, and we invite other people, Michael Rosen and a number of others, to choose poems to put in the book as well. And then we went through this process. And I tell you, it's the hardest thing in the world. Somebody said to me, all you've got to do is choose 20 poems and write 500,000 words about why you like the poem. Okay? I started off with a long list of 60 poems. And then I started reducing it. And that became hard. And I felt bad leaving poets out. Oh, God, this is terrible. And so eventually we get it down to 20. And then Len was doing the same. We agreed not to each choose the same poet, because that would just be ridiculous. And so we went on doing this. We then had an argument about the poem The Runaway Slave at Pilgrim's Point by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I think it's a long poem, yes. It's very interesting and written from the perspective of a young woman who came from a wealthy family, gave it all up and was indeed driven out of the family because she opposed the slave trade, where the family had made money from the slave trade in Jamaica. And I think the poem is interesting and very effective. And so I don't know what Colin's view on it was, but others were. It's far too long to have in the book. So I said it either goes in its entirety or it doesn't go in at all. So we had a long discussion about this, and it is in its entirety in the book. And there are many other poems. And the poems are a selection from different people in different parts of the world. Wassam Shire, poem about refugees. Andrew Salke from Jamaica. And there's Ben Okri, wonderful poems that he wrote as well. So there's a very wide selection in the book. And it was the most beautiful work I've ever been asked to do. And so night after night, I'd go home and think, right, tonight I'm going to write about Ben Ockery, and I'm going to write 500 or 1,000 words. Writing a short piece about somebody is much harder than writing a long piece, as I think anyone that writes anything knows. And then we eventually produced the book and launched it at a local theatre in our area, and I think it sold pretty well.
Yeah.
And we've done lots of poetry events all around the country, and we always invite people to read their own poetry. Now, there's lots in here I could read, but I think the one that would be probably best is In Jerusalem by Mahmoud Darwish, which I'll read now if that's okay with you. But please buy the book, then you can read it all to yourself. The other thing I'd say is, if you're embarrassed about liking poetry, don't be. If you write it secretly, don't write it publicly, but carry on writing whatever you decide to do. And if you want to enjoy and understand a poem, don't read it quietly to yourself. Read it out loud. It has a completely different meaning, even when you hear yourself reading it out loud. If your fellow flatmates, partner, whatever, really doesn't want you doing that, go to the bathroom and read it out loud to yourself, because that way it has a completely different meaning. Now, Mahmoud Darwish died in 2008, so he wasn't around for the latest horror stories of the Palestinian people. He grew up in Israel and in Palestine, studied in Moscow in the Soviet Union, was banned from going back, ended up living in Tunis and other places. And he was actually banned from going into Jerusalem when he wrote this poem in, I think, 1974. And it's called In Jerusalem by Mahmoud Darwish. And he's a revered Palestinian poet. So I'll read it to you, and I hope I do these wonderful words justice. In Jerusalem by Mahmoud Darwish. In Jerusalem, and I mean within the ancient walls, I walk from one epoch to another without a memory to guide me. The prophet over there are sharing the history of the holy, ascending to heaven and returning less discouraged and melancholy, because love and peace are holy and are coming to town. I was walking down a slope and thinking to myself, how do the narrators disagree over what light said about a stone? Is it from a dimly lit stone that wars flare up? I walk in my sleep. I stare in my sleep. I see no one behind me. I see no one ahead of me. All this light is for me. I walk. I become lighter. I fly. Then I become another, transfigured. Words sprout like grass from Isaiah's messenger's mouth. If you don't believe, you won't be safe. I walk as if I were another. And my wound, a white biblical rose, and my hands like two doves on the cross hovering and carrying the earth. I don't walk, I fly, I become another, transfigured, no place and no time. So who am I? Am I number one in Ascension's presence? But I think to myself alone. The Prophet Mahmoud spoke classical Arabic. And then what? Then what? A woman soldier shouted. Is that you again? Didn't I kill you? I said, you killed me, and I forgot, like you, to die.
Well, that was great, Jeremy. Thanks for that. So we can take a few questions. Does anyone want to ask Jeremy something? Yeah, Katie. So Katie said perhaps one of the reasons why there were so few people on the streets around Iran was because when we turned out for Iraq, we failed to stop that war.
All generations have a cause. I mentioned my mum before. She and my dad's generation were those campaigning for the Spanish Republic in the 1930s when the fascists invaded Spain and imposed Franco there. They didn't win, obviously, because the Spanish Republic was destroyed and the fascists took over. But it framed their mindset and their thought, and it framed their mindset of the need to oppose fascism whenever it rises its head. Other generations have campaigned against the H-bomb, against nuclear weapons, and the huge movement against the Vietnam War. At one level, it didn't stop the Vietnam War, but the Vietnam War came to an end partly because of the demonstrations here in the USA, partly because of demonstrations all around the world, and especially because of the enormous sacrifices in their millions of the Vietnamese people against that war. The Iraq War was a huge cause. We didn't obviously stop that war, but it formed the mindset of other generations coming later who decided that they weren't going to risk another war, and that's partly why some countries have not joined in this madness of this war against Iran. And so reasons why there are not more people coming out, hard to tell. I think it's because they believe it won't last very long and it'll be over very soon. And I hope that is the case. But I do say there's also a degree of concentration on Palestine, which has mobilized a lot of people. The strange thing is that massive movement, which I talked about in earlier to Colin's questions, hasn't at the same time become the enormous anti-war movement that I think we all need. The campaign against militarism is important, and that's why I'm supporting what's going on in Europe on June the 14th. We're holding a big demonstration in Brussels, which is a declaration against militarism and for the supporting the levels of social spending that exist in Europe. So it's welfare, not warfare message. I think we need that as a global thing. Look at the massive social inequalities, poverty and injustice that's happening in every big city in the USA. Look at the way in which public spending cuts are imposed on all social programs all across Europe, and the massive increase promoted by Donald Trump of arms expenditure. He's looking to put on another, goodness knows how much, another $500 billion or something in the USA, and all the NATO countries are trying to rise to 5% of GDP ultimately, which would be an obscenity compared to the needs of the people. So we need that global movement, and maybe, just maybe, this is the time for that global movement to take off. Needs a simple, creative slogan: welfare, not warfare, works in Europe. I'm not sure it works in the same way in the USA, because there's different perceptions about public services, and also your sad lack of a proper health service that provides health care for everybody. I think, by the way, it would be a really good idea in the USA.
Yeah, and
It was much better organized than we expected, suspected, or realized at the time. There was a concerted campaign in the media to portray me as something that I absolutely am not, and totally refute the foul allegations that are made against me. But at its height in 2018, this was after the 2017 election, when we came, in the view of the ruling classes, perilously close to gaining office. It meant that every single interview I did anywhere in the country, whatever it was, that was the first question, and they would attempt to dominate that for the whole of every interview. And so whatever you say, it almost becomes a truism, and that's what they intended to achieve. There's many books been written on this, and the book by Holden that you've published, and a number of other books on this, I do urge people to have a look at, because it is an abuse of language and history, the way that things were said and done against us, with this disgraceful accusation that we're some or other anti-Semitic. I'm also very grateful to, as I said, the tens of thousands, and they are tens of thousands of Jewish people in Britain and other parts all over the world who actually stood up against this stuff and defended us, and often got into very deep, often probably very, very unpleasant family and other kinds of arguments about it. But we have to stand up against these dishonest allegations that are made against individuals. Zoran has gone through all of that, and many others will go through all of that. What we need, surely, is a recognition that racism is bad and wrong in any form whatsoever, and there should be no exceptionalism in that. And that will have to. Did we underestimate the strength of it when it started? Yes, absolutely. I didn't believe that such an allegation would or could or should be made against me or any of my close colleagues, but it was, and it grew a great deal. And so I would urge you all just to, when somebody that you support and agree with politically is accused of something that you think is nonsense and wrong and dangerous, then stand up for them. Don't just be silent and allow it to grow and fester. And so yes, I have many reflections about it, and they'll all be published in my book this time next year.
Anyone else? Beirut.
Yes, it's the issue is obviously what you want to achieve and how you get there to achieve it. And along the way, there are delays and problems, and there are difficulties. Now, Zoran fought a great campaign and became the mayor, and all of you presumably joined in and supported that campaign. Amazing achievement. The promises on housing and so much else, great. It's delivering them, because it takes several years to build a house. It takes several years to get some of these changes going through. So you've got to make sure that you keep the people with you while you're doing that process, and that's the hard part. And it is, so I think we need to move away from the idea of transactional politics. You vote for me, I'll build your house, but you'll stay there and I'll stay here. Okay? Maybe it's much better if you and I are together in a community and we are making sure that the necessary housing is built, but we've empowered the whole community along the way. So it isn't the sort of transactional politics where you negotiate with your political leader. You actually achieve something together. So the power then transcends it. What I've tried to do in my own community since I ceased to be a Labour MP and now elected as an independent is that we hold a forum, at least every month, sometimes more often than that. And these forums are very well attended, and each of them has a specific theme about it. Half of the forum is the theme. The second half is me reporting on what I've been doing as their Member of Parliament. And I'll give you an example. We have a forum on mental health. Now, mental health stresses are getting worse rapidly, partly from poverty, partly from debt, partly from medical issues, a whole lot of issues. Mental health stress is a real problem. And the services are not there to deal with the support for people. The counselling is not there. And the public opprobrium of people suffering mental health and the alleged humour on television and so on damages those people that are going through stress. You know, jokes about people being mad and all this sort of thing. And so the first half of the forum discusses this with people who are going through a crisis if they want to talk about it, and also the organisations supporting them. We don't stop there. We say, okay, we've all accepted there is an issue. We've all accepted we've got to do something. Now, what are we going to do about it? So there has to be a resolve of everyone there that we're actually going to do something about it. Pressurise for services, whatever it happens to be. I think that's important. And so what I hope that can come out of this amazing opportunity in New York now is that you develop that sense of community empowerment to bring about those changes. Think about this. All the great changes in history. How was slavery abolished? Was it, in the case of Britain, the brilliance of William Wilberforce in Parliament? Was it what happened with Lincoln in the USA? Or was it actually those people that survived the passage from Africa to the Caribbean and to America, standing up and fighting back against it? Was it not the industrial action taken by sugar workers in Jamaica, opposing the sugar owners and the slave trade and slavery, that actually was the catalyst for the abolition? What are our children taught in school? Are they taught it was the slaves who abolished slavery, or are they taught that it was the white liberals in Europe and North America that saw the badness in slavery? I think we all know the answer to that question. There's so many other issues, like how did we ever get an 8-hour day? How did we ever get weekends? How did we ever get any of the labour movement rights? Was it not the bravery of people in Chicago? Was it not the bravery of people in the docks in London and Dublin and other places? That's where labour movement changes come about. So I think the best thing we can do is start having history discussions. And the best way to make history popular in schools isn't to give them a lecture, is to ask them what happened in our community. What's the history of our community? What happened here? Who stood up for what? Why? That way you make history seem relevant, involved, and exciting to people. And history is the greatest thing that forms the opinions of young people. Their perceptions of the world, their perceptions of other countries, their perceptions of diversity, all come from very early understanding of history. So I'd be looking at history teaching in primary schools, because that's where it all starts.
Okay. Well, one more question, and then we'll close it out.
Hi. Well, I don't drink, only fruit juice. Thank you. There is huge influence of USA on British society and British culture, and huge political influence. And it goes back a long way, particularly to the First World War. It wasn't so much the American um, military involvement that was the key. It was the American financial involvement in Britain, which was enormous. And Britain was trying to rather unwisely maintain its empire, which it couldn't afford, and the US, in a sense, bailed that out, whilst at the same time busily building its own empire in the Pacific and elsewhere. There's also the language issue, in that American film and so on is a kind of norm, and the power of Hollywood, in a sense, managed to silence or destroy most of the European film industry, particularly since the end of the Second World War. Not completely, but they made big efforts on that. So there's been this sort of close cultural thing. And there's also a very close following, to some, rather superficially perhaps, of news from the USA. Most channels have a sort of American news item at 11 o'clock midnight or something like that. It doesn't happen for India, it doesn't happen for China, it doesn't happen for anywhere of Africa or Russia. It's only the USA. And so there is also the question of the economic relationship. Now, historically, the USA wanted the European Union to be established, and that came from the Congress for Cultural Freedom in Amsterdam in 1948 or 9, I think, somewhere around then. And that morphed into the European Coal and Steel Community, morphed into the Common Market, which Britain was never a member of at that stage, didn't join until 1973. And the argument was always two, really. One, that Britain had a colonial Commonwealth market that it could rely on for the future, which was always a nonsense, because it clearly wasn't going to be something they could rely on, and they'd have to sell goods elsewhere in the world. And so the whole idea was this close relationship between Britain and the USA. There was also the close military relationship coming from 1948, when the US troops came back, and the Visiting Forces Act gives enormous powers to US troops within Britain. And so there's that very close military relationship, and that is very, very deep. And so that morphs into a commercial relationship, and the politics of the free market, of Milton Friedman and company, Chicago School, which were devastating to the people of Chile, and very influential on Thatcher and that Tory government, which did so much to destroy industry in Britain from 1979 onwards. Now, fast forward to nowish, 2019 election, I'm doing a TV debate with Boris Johnson, and I pull out a load of papers, put them on the desk in front of me, and read them out on television. These are papers that evidence of secret negotiations between Boris Johnson and his predecessor, Theresa May, as Prime Minister, for negotiations with US healthcare companies to come in to take over what they gently and very politely call the UK health market. There is no health market in the UK. If you have a national health service, they're trying to create one. So I exposed this and saying, well, actually, what you're doing is pretend you're going to bring in Palantir, etc. Starmer goes on and has private meetings with Palantir at a later stage. And so what happens when I say this on television? I'm told, and every paper carried the story, that actually these papers that I'd used were a fabrication made up by the Russians in order for me to dupe the British public with Russian propaganda. Not one paper actually faced up to the issue. What I was talking about was US healthcare coming in and taking over our National Health Service. Within months of the election, deals had been signed for GP, general practice surgeries, to be sold to an American company. The preferred bidder for data, health data, is Palantir. And so it goes on. Everything I said actually has come to pass since then. And that is the influence, media influence, ownership, etc. I have to say this, they've overreached themselves with Palantir, absolutely overreached themselves. Massive campaign against him, and even the Financial Times, not a revolutionary left-wing socialist paper. The title is a bit of a giveaway, actually. They're running a poll do you want Palantir to take over NHS data? Last time I looked, it was running at 80% no. That's an indication of how things are going. We're going to campaign to the end to keep Palantir out of our NHS as a way of defending the idea publicly owned, publicly funded, publicly run, and publicly accountable health service with free health care for all, irrespective of their income levels. That's how health service should be run.
Okay, Margaret, did you want to add something?
Brexit. The referendum happened, as you know, in 2016. I was not prepared to join in the Tory campaign on it, and we ran a campaign for Remain and Reform in the EU because I wanted to challenge some of the economic direction of the European Union in terms of privatisation, enforced privatisation of public services, and a ban on government investment in industries. It's euphemistically called state aid. The referendum result was what it was, and I said that we should accept the result, but negotiate an exit from the EU, which involved negotiating a trade deal with the European Union, which I started to negotiate in opposition with the European Union. And we came to the 2019 election. Johnson ran this highly simplistic but very effective campaign, Get Brexit Done. And there was a lot of nationalist fervour around this by Johnson and others. And the coalition they'd put together to win the referendum, in a sense, kind of came out for them again. And our position on Brexit, which was that we would negotiate and then put it to us a referendum to decide on the results of that negotiation. That was not the effect, did not have the popular effect that we hoped it would, and you all know the result of that election. We've now had some years of Brexit. There's now been an understanding there's got to be a closer trade relationship with Europe, but there's also, in my view, a danger that the European Union has gone off in the opposite direction of setting itself up as a military alliance and as well as a rather conservative financial alliance. And look at the way the European Central Bank treated Greece and Italy. So I don't think Britain is likely at any stage to go back into the European Union. I do think there will be some kind of negotiated agreement with the EU on trade. And also, we have managed to maintain most of the parallel regulations on workers' rights and on environmental protection issues. When we were negotiating with May's government on the Brexit plan that she was putting forward, I thought the talks would collapse on the basis of workers' rights. It didn't. What it collapsed on was on the issues of environmental protections and planning, where she wants free market, she wanted more free market solutions, whereas I wanted environmental protections. And that includes planning permissions which protect the environment rather than destroy the environment. And the negotiations actually collapsed on that and those kind of issues. And so the relations with Europe, I maintain through the left, and lots of others on the left do good relations with the left parties in Europe. I attend meetings of the United European Left, and also through Progressive International I have a lot of contacts with them, hence the demonstration I was talking about, and the need to come together on a Europe-wide campaign against racism and the disgusting treatment of refugees. Listen, the numbers of refugees entering the USA or entering Europe is tiny compared to the global numbers. It's the poorest countries in the poorest places that accept the most refugees and look after the most refugees. and we should get over it and recognise it's a global issue created by the economic and military system that we are involved in, and have a more humanitarian and humane approach towards people who are victims rather than cussing them, as has been happening. And so Brexit, yes, has happened. Does it mean there's bad relations with people in Europe? No, not at all. Quite the opposite, in fact. And it's also partly regional within the UK. In my own constituency, they voted 80% Remain. In other constituencies in the north of England with exactly the same socio-economic conditions, they voted 80% Leave. It's partly perceptions of society and perceptions of relationship with Europe that were part of the problem. My difficulty in leading the party in all this was that about 2/3 of Labour voters, 60-70% of Labour voters voted Remain, 35 to 40% voted to Leave. Amongst Labour Party members, about the same, maybe more, maybe a higher proportion Remain. We couldn't win an election without winning over people that had voted Leave. And so we had to recognise and try and understand why they'd done that and promote the economic way that we put forward on it. And we all know what the ultimate result would be. It was a very difficult situation, but we had to face that situation.
Okay. I think we're going to wind up now. I wanted to thank you all for coming, and I especially wanted to thank Jeremy for being here. Really, it's a great honour to have you here, Jeremy. Thanks again. So Jeremy will sign some copies of his book at the front of the
We're
the
down
room.
there at the front, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, I'll come down there now and we'll sign the books. And you can write happy birthday in each book for Colin. Come on, Colin, let's just have a round of applause for Colin.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think it might be easier if you stay up here, because that up there. So Jeremy's actually going to be signing books up at the stage here, so you can line up by the stage.